בחלל של הגלריה. את ממש מוזמנת לבוא, וגם אם את רוצה לעשות שם משהו, כאילו לגמרי open to negotiation. וזה מאוד כזה מעכשיו לעכשיו. כן. כן. CC 17 מתארחים באירוע של אטלס 110, ראשים מדברים 2, presenting body the new religion, and the master of the body the new religion. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, shalom kulam. Welcome everybody. This is a special show. It's a special performance. Not only I'm going to present my theory of bodies for the first time, it's also hosted live on YouTube right now, and it's part of a project we're doing with Nimrod Gershoni on the CCTV studios. And we are hosting the Body TV. And today we are hosted by the Atlas Group 110. So thank you for hosting us here. And yes, everybody, this is live. And it's called the Theory of Bodies. So. This is a theory I wrote down in the last year. It started with the Body Neo Religion artwork that I was doing, and inspired by the idea of a body and trying to figure out what is a body. Not only the body that's the physical body, but the whole package, the body, the mind. What is it? What is it all together? Trying to figure this out, I started writing this theory, and it's called the Theory of Bodies. And this theory is trying to do something very pretentious, which is to explain everything that exists from the point of view of a body. Everything is a body. We are all bodies, inside bodies, and yes, bodies inside bodies. And so what is a body? The first thing that came up to my mind was body is a definition. And I made this sketch just to show you how simple it is. It's a definition, and the thing that makes it a body is the fact it has itself. Okay? It's not empty. It's real. But the question is, what is the definition? What is the real thing? So the self is the real thing. A body is what we're trying to explain. Now, many times, in order to explain a body, we just go through a cycle of self-realization. That's actually the whole purpose of being a body, is to try to figure out who we are, what is the self, what is itself. So in my case, it's myself, but in any other case, it's the same story. And every being has the same drive. Usually we just see our drive, ourself, but every body has the same drive, and it's to realize itself. An interesting thing that happens once a body is being realized, it's no longer putting us in danger. Because if we are not realizing the bodies that we have, they start taking control of us. And what do I mean by that? Well, they become bigger and bigger, and they create more and more bodies in order to explain themselves and justify themselves. And the bigger they grow, the more they will want to justify themselves. It will be almost impossible to say to this body, no, you are not real. But the fact is that all of those bodies are inside a main body. Well, let's remember, we started with a simple thing. Inside this thing, there are so many bodies right now that this body, if this body will ever ask himself who or what is myself, he'll never figure it out, because he's so full of other bodies, and each body is telling him, no, do this, do that, I'm this, I'm that. So it's really hard in this whole mess of being a full body, a very dense body. How could you ever find yourself? And so that was a little bit about what bodies are. And the way I see it, each body is going through a life cycle. And now I'll go back to just kind of also talking about us. Like and we all go through the same cycles. And it's a cycle that I see that is starting. Again, it's the cycle of self-realization. It's finding out yourself. And it starts with the repressed body. It ends with the enlightened body, and in the middle you have all the in between, which is actually most of what we experience. And it's the moment of seeking and asking questions, and actually literally being between the enlightenment and the repression. So we'll start with the repressed body. Because the bodies, they have so many bodies in them, and it's a whole constellation of bodies that we are consisted of. Because this is just one example, and this can be, if I can give it an example, this can be a body of, you can call it sadness. This is all I ever defined as sadness in my life, or happiness, doesn't matter, but it can be a concept, and forever, everything that I will see through the eyes, whenever I will think about the definition of sadness, what is sadness to me, because usually we think that we all have the same definition, my sadness is your sadness, but it's so untrue. Like each one of us has his own definition of a feeling as sensation, and only we know it. So if we'll see that this sadness is actually a body, then we can also figure out where did this body form for the first time, and what does it mean, sadness to me, and you can go through the cycle. But even without the self-realization, just this body as it is, it affects other bodies around it. So it creates this whole scenario of bodies, creates a constellation. Each one of us has its own unique constellation that works, and I think looks completely different. It's you put all of your thoughts in this bubble of constellation of bodies, and this is who you are, because our body is full of so many things, and that's what we are. Unless we remember the simple thing that we are actually a self. But usually we are just in the world of bodies and what we know of ourselves, and that's how we show it to the world, and we all kind of like hold this body thing. And so going back to the repressed body, bodies have a lot of work to do in order to maintain this constellation running, going. And some bodies are being repressed. Sometimes we repress them consciously. Whoa, this thing, I don't want to deal with this. And they just go, okay, maybe this, I won't deal with it now. Maybe it goes like to the end of the list, and I'll deal with it whenever I'll finish all the other tasks or all the other important things. And sometimes those bodies are being repressed for a very long time, some of them for years, some of them for even, I don't know, a few minutes. The ones that are repressed for years, they are very dangerous. Why? Because if you have a body that you are not aware of, and you take it with you, forever this body will grow to justify itself. And at some point, it's so big, it's you. You think it's your body, it's who you are. What happens when the repressed body shows up? What happens when it's time to deal with a certain body? What do we do? Usually, the way I see it, usually when the repressed body is really showing up, there's nothing we can do. It just go. It will push forever. It will push us to our limits until we'll grasp ourselves and say, okay, I have to take myself together. Okay, I have to deal with this issue. Okay, my wife is leaving me. I have to deal with this. Okay. Like we all get to this point at some point. Sometimes we don't even need to be pushed so far, so hard. And so when the repressed body appears, we start, and actually the harsh moments of repression are before it appears. Once it comes to the surface and a body is being aware of itself as repressed, it's no longer repressed. Like poof, no longer repression. The repression is just as long as the body is not aware. And now, I'll go back to this. The body, the repressed body, really, this is the body, it really doesn't want to know itself. It's like, no. If the other bodies are all the time trying to go to the self-realization cycle, the repressed body is, no, it doesn't want to go there. And why? It has its own reasons, and sometimes has to do with other bodies, or it has to do with the reason, as I said before, it just got pushed down the list. And once the repressed body is no longer repressed, and we understand that, okay, something is calling me, and that's the moment we become seekers, and we start to ask questions. What is it? What is calling me? What is? Why did I feel repressed? You start asking all kinds of things that probably has to do with the self of the body that you are. And now what is the self? Wow, it's such a big question, right? It's the biggest question. But this cycle is just pushing you towards going through this cycle and trying to figure out the self. And the wanderer is moving all the time in between the repression and the enlightenment. And enlightenment is the moment that the body finally realizes itself. And poof, now that it knows itself, great things happen. Why? Because you remember all the other bodies that are in it, and the dense body that is so full that you can barely see the self. Whatever it's in there will disappear, all of it, at the same time, once this body will become itself and realize itself. And that's the moment of light. That's the moment of light appearing out of darkness, from not knowing to asking and knowing, because knowing is there. We don't have to be always in this cycle of asking, and we don't want to be also always in this place of just rejecting life. So this is the moment, the enlightened moment. So this was a little bit about the cycles that bodies go through. And just to show you a little bit about the body and self. Very important thing, when a body realizes itself, it's no longer a body. And this is a little bit hard to grasp. But again, if we go back to the idea of definitions, when we define something, what does it mean to define? Because it's not only about putting a name on something. The name is already the first thing. It's already the first thing that keeps me away from the real thing. It's a name, it's not the real thing. Let's say I'm talking about an experience, a whole experience. not even a second, an experience, the way we have memories and we can define them or see them as experiences. So how can you define an experience? It's so hard. Like, do you tell a story? No, it's not a story. So what makes it what it is? And I think experiences are actually very influential bodies. They are almost the most influential bodies that we have in us. And so once the body is realizing itself, which again, it sometimes goes through the whole cycle, as I said, from repression to enlightenment. It can be a very long cycle. It can take maybe a lifetime, but it can also be like those general fast cycles that are just happening every moment. Of us kind of having a moment, oh, this scenario right now feels so good, it's so much fun, and then maybe a moment later, oh my God, it was horrible. And this happens all the time. We are all the time changing the definition of the body. The theory is really, tell you the truth, it's like a really big thing. It's got to be a thick book. So of course I'm not going to go into all the details, but in order to give you a little bit of the feeling of this theory, I want to show you a few different types of bodies. So for instance, an empty body. An empty body, if I was telling you before about this heavy, dense body, which is again, it was just one of so many. And it's actually inside a bigger one, which is let's say myself, that holds all of those bodies. So if you take like this body, let's go back to me or anybody else. An empty body empty body.
This moment is an empty body.
It's an empty body now. Body's empty. No, an empty body is a great feeling. I think we all know this feeling of feeling empty. And maybe we can even recognize people that their whole being is kind of empty, and we're like, ooh, this person is so light. It's like a feeling of like being very empty. And I think that part of this cycle of life, like the whole cycle of life, is actually to get empty as a body. And but only if you get to the moment of awareness, being aware of the fact that you have control of how your body looks and behaves, like, because most of us are also not even so much aware of the powers we have in creating our own bodies, and we tend to take things for granted sometimes when they just appear into our life, and instead of seeing how we created them as a body. So, but once you understand that you are aware of your body, and it's like, oh, how do I want my body to be? So an empty body is a really great body. Why? Because it's a body that, instead of all the time growing bigger and bigger and bigger, which is what we did since ever, it actually gets rid of bodies. It gets rid of them. It gets rid. Why do I need to define myself? Even it can get to a point of, why should I define myself as a woman or as a man? Like, questions like that. Why should I define myself as a human being? Why should I define myself as somebody who is mortal? I don't know, like questions like that. So the way that you can empty yourself from bodies is actually infinite. Like, you could really become empty at some point, like theoretically. So this is one example. And, There are also another issue is bodies that we share. Because many bodies, it's not only about our bodies and the way we have defined the world, it's also about some common way that we define the world together, and it's a common way that we share bodies. That's what I see, like the concept of friendship, for instance. Two bodies that they share something together. They are actually having a body in between them, which is just a body by itself. It's not my body and it's not your body, but we both share this thing in common. And so in that sense, we share a lot of bodies, and we share a lot of different types of bodies. Like sometimes we share very unique bodies, but sometimes we also share very general bodies as a whole. Like the whole nation is sharing this body of, like, I don't know, this Israel, you know, is a big body that we all share together, and this concept of what it means. So there are also a lot of programmed defined bodies that we are all part of, and we share them together. I will read to you the great body. I love the great body. Great body, which has been grown to great dimensions while keeping itself empty from random bodies. It is a body which one can feel was being enlightened many times. The more the body becomes self-realized, the more enlightened it was, the greater it is. Bodies can sense when a great body is around them. This might attract them to want to learn from the great body how to attain greatness themselves, or just to feel the great body's self-awareness. Okay, guys, so this is dedicated to all of us, all of you, great bodies. Thank you very much. That's the end of the lecture. Change the body? Yeah. We share so much together.
No, nena.
עכשיו עוד מעלוד, איפה עוד מעלוד?
לא, באמת הכל זה חלק מתערוכת אומנות שגם עכשיו אנחנו מציגים אותה ב-CC17 TV Studios, שזה באתר השני של בצלאל. היה לנו שבוע שלם של קמפינג בתוך התערוכה עם צילום לייב ליוטיוב, וזה פרויקט שאני מאוד הזמין אותי לעשות אותו, ואני לתוך זה הכנסתי את האומנות שלי, שזה משהו כמו Body the New Religion. אז מה שהצגתי לכם עכשיו זה חלק מהפרויקט הזה, זה בעצם חלק מהתערוכה.
עכשיו מוצג?
כן, זה גם עכשיו, זה אפילו אונליין, ביוטיוב. אפשר להגיע. Body the New Religion. Body the New Religion. Google it. Body equals the new religion. We still videotape?
Yes.